should put effort to see whether the objects of devolution are being achieved. From the perspective of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we also had that problem, where county attorneys were representing people or coming up with criminal laws without the participation of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So I think when we download the functions that are given to the county governments and the national government, there is need to give guideline on where the boundary is, how far they can go. Because if we don't act together, there's no unity of purpose, we act in cross purposes, then the person who is benefiting is the person who is the enemy of our country. So I think that is one area that we need to relook at. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, my question, last one was not answered.
Which one?
Which is?
I just wanted, as a legal advisor of the executive, and we talked about, I just mentioned the issue of the recent demos and the people that were injured, killed. His Excellency, the President himself, talked about compensation. I wanted to get your comment on that and what advice you would give, because the government would be the one that stands accused.
My apologies.
Go ahead.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, as the custodian of people's rights, the Attorney General is also expected to uphold the rights of the people who have been injured and complainants and victims. I am aware that there is a Victims Compensation Act that has been legislated by this August House. There is an initiative to operationalize the Victim Compensation Board, which is under the Office of the Attorney General. As a prosecutor, compensation of victims is a very important tool in the fight against corruption, because many instances we have complainants who lose things. Either they are taken by accused persons or they are injured by people in government, but they don't get compensated. To buttress the gaps that I was talking about in the criminal justice system, I think the Victim Compensation Act and the Victim Compensation Board, I'm sorry if I don't get the names right, that fall under the Office of the Attorney General should be operationalized so that we give the parameters and the standards of compensation of victims. And that will also be a priority.
Morugara's questions? Many short ones. So you can run through them quickly.
Yes. The image of the Office of the Attorney General. It is my vision that if I'm confirmed, I would strive to make sure that the Office of the Attorney General is that office that is described under the Constitution, that it is the people's lawyer. Whether or not I will meet that standard will depend on my actions. I have been given the tools, I have been given the legislations, and it is my hope with proper support and the support of this House, we are able to make that office what it ought to be. Whether or not I will be able to go to court to defend the government, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members of this committee, I will lead from the front. About CLE, I'd already talked about it. And I wouldn't want to go into the nuances of the report, but I think this is one of the issues that is captured. So once confirmed, I will go back and relook at those reports and review the two legislations that are pending before Parliament.
If confirmed.
I'm sorry, my lord. He almost made me think that had already been confirmed. Sorry. I'm sorry, sir. If confirmed, I will again go and relook at those two reports and look at the two legislations that are pending before this House, and it will be a priority, and I will be coming back to you with proposals, and I will be coming back to you to seek assistance. And you have helped me when I was in the office of the DPP. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. Big
pending cumulative awards.
Honorable Speaker, sir, and honorable members. I am informed and I know that some of these awards maybe are not big, but it is the interest that accrue, especially if it is compound interest. To enable me satisfactory answer that, once, if I am confirmed, I undertake to take an audit of what is pending, the reasons why they are pending, the challenges in satisfying the orders, and I'll be able to give a satisfactory answer. Thank you.
Can we have Daoud, Honorable Emase, Honorable Mukami, those three? Then we'll be left with the remainder. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senior Counsel, you just mentioned that Constitution, you would consider Constitution changes if possible. I want to put it to you because I've given to our Speaker. I'm waiting for the legal counsel from Parliament to draft it. Would you consider that because of the Gen Zs, particularly now, I have made a suggestion where we need to do away with the Senate. I have said we do not need to have governors. We revert back probably to mayors of counties who would run the political angle of the county, whereas the administrative would have clerks like town clerks used to be there before. With that, then we establish a committee in Parliament, which in the National Assembly, by the way, when I say Parliament, I mean just National Assembly and not the Senate, where we would have a committee on devolution to take care of the counties so that we reduce all that baggage which is there, because basically Senate takes care of counties, which can be done by a committee of Parliament, of National Assembly. The same thing can be done. Would you consider something like that to be feasible for change of the law? I know it may involve the referendum or something. Secondly, the Office of the Public Trustee, until 3 months back, I never knew they would do a succession case, which has been done. There was a property I bought from somebody, and they had gone through a public trustee instead of going through succession in court, which takes a lot of money and time as well. But the problem was public trustee took more time than a succession course. Would you consider devolving all, if you are approved, the public trustee to each and every county? Because currently what is there in our region is in the old provincial headquarters, that is Embu. Would you consider, and would you publicize it so that many people know that there is an office of public trustee which can do those cases, and I think they're practically free. There is not much involved in that. Would you consider that? Thank you.
Honorable Emase.
Thank you. Speaker, through you, my concern still goes to public participation. I know it's been mentioned, but I'm asking it in a different context. Nominee, the Attorney General's office is a lead coordinating agency on the realization of the draft Kenya policy and public participation. But Kenyans are dissatisfied with the manner in which we conduct public participation. And recently, most of the legislators have suffered in the hands of our constituents because they feel there was no transparent and accessible public participation. Now, in view of the public expectations, what are your thoughts on public participation? Because as it stands now, the committee conducting public participation sits in some boardroom or hotel in Nairobi, receives submissions from members of the public who are able to get to that venue, while those in far-flung areas are left with online avenue to send their submissions through email or whichever other means. So, in view of the dissatisfaction by the public, what are your thoughts about how we should conduct our public participation going forward. My second concern goes to the Advocates Complaints Commission and the Disciplinary Tribunal. Again, I put it to you that many Kenyans are suffering in the hands of rogue lawyers. They receive benefits on behalf of the clients, they squander. They are given services and paid, they don't deliver. And it takes almost forever for these Kenyans to get any redress. Are these institutions effective? Or what are you going to do, if approved, to ensure that Kenyans get redress when they find themselves in these situations? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. To the nominee, the weakest link in the fight against corruption is a prosecution of persons accused of economic crimes. The other day, again, I went to Nyeri prison, and I realized that the most poor people, the young mothers, those who don't have lawyers to represent them, they're the ones who are rotting in jail. And yet, they have petty crimes. I would really like to know what you're going to do about it, if approved. Thank you.
Nominee, answer those three.
Thank you, Honorable Speakers and Honorable Members. As I had said before, we exercise liberal democracy by the people and for the people. And the rule of law requires that when we make laws, people must participate in making of laws. The laws must be available. The laws must be accessible. It is therefore my submission, Mr. Speaker, sir, as to what should be changed in the constitution or reviewed in the constitution will depend on what Kenyans will decide. I would therefore be happy if part of those recommendations are part of the things that Kenyans would recommend, then they will take the natural legislative process. I'm not able to answer as a person because the process has to start from the people. But if accepted, they will be part of what will be reviewed. The Office of the Public Trustee. It is not that I will do or whether I will do. If approved to this position, I am aware that the Cabinet has directed the Office of the Attorney General to decentralize to the 47 counties. I am aware this is one of the people-facing departments whose services are required to the lowest level. It will therefore be my responsibility and priority to make sure that the Public Trustee Department is devolved and decentralized. Secondly, there is a need to conduct public education and awareness on the services being rendered by this department. If approved, I undertake from the first week to put in a mechanism where the Office of the Attorney General will conduct cafes. We did this from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, where every Friday would have an ODPP cafe, where deputy directors, prosecution counsel, and even experts from outside would educate Kenyans. So I will approach it from the purview of strategic communication. I will involve the media, civil society, and Kenyans, and make sure that the services of the Office of the Attorney General are taken to the people, are unknown to the people. I also know that the rule of law requires that laws and procedures must be available in a language that we understand. There is a need, Mr. Speaker, sir, so many years after independence, all criminal laws and procedures and all laws are still in English. People cannot access them. Deaf people cannot access them. There is a need for us to make that law accessible in a manner and in a language that can be understood by the people. So there's also a need to make those services understandable and accessible in a manner that people can understand. Thanks.
Speaker, I just want clarification on the constitutional amendment which I've spoken about. The nominees...
Okay, he asked whether you will support a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, she has said it has to come from the public. So are you telling us that as legislators, if we bring that constitutional amendment, if it is approved through the Speaker, that it may fail because of it has not originated from the public?
Both the honourable member and the nominee, the process of amending the Constitution is defined in the Constitution itself. It can't be any different. You can bring a constitutional amendment bill. You can go by way of popular initiative that will lead to a referendum. So none of you is limited in what you can do, except that it must be done in accordance with the Constitution itself.
Okay. Because she just mentioned it would be done through public participation only. No, if I heard her right.
Did you say that, nominee?
Honorable Sir, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members, I said it has to be by the people, and the House represents the people.
Go ahead.
I was asked about public participation. Riding from the recent court case, we have been guided that public participation should be meaningful and impactful. As to what should be public participation is where the problem is. And as I had said before, there is a need for us to come up with standards and involve the public to come up with standards and expectation of what public participation should be. And once we have that, we'll be able to direct and make sure that every legislation goes through the envisaged standard and expectation of the people.
Honorable Speaker, if I can.
Maybe if I can, I rarely participate at this level, but I want to ask you, what we are grappling with is we have bills that go through the bicameral process. Starts from the Senate, ends in the National Assembly, and vice versa. If you find favor and you become the Attorney General and the principal legal advisor to the government, assisting all institutions, including Parliament, what would be your view in a situation where courts are striking out legislation on the basis of public participation, but you'll find that a bill emanating from, say, the National Assembly has gone through the entire hog of public participation. Going to this, let me give you an example. We had a sugar bill. Came from the National Assembly. The committee went to all the sugar growing areas, Ramisi, Rongo, Awendo, Mumias, Mohoroni, Miwani, Nzoia, all over. Picked views. The bill is passed, goes to the next house. Again, they pick it and embark on the same journey. Going to Miwani to talk to the same people that the National Assembly talked to, and so on and so forth. Would you, if you found favor and became the Attorney General, engineer a legislation that will give a threshold of public participation and find whether public participation by one house is public participation deemed to have been done by the other house, except where there are gaps? Or what would be your thinking? Yes, Emma.
And Honorable Speaker, it will become even more cumbersome because going by the recent pronouncements by the Court of Appeal while invalidating the Finance Bill 2023, now Parliament is obligated to do public participation on each and every amendment, even to an old bill, treating it as if it's a new one. So now we're asking ourselves, what exactly should this public participation entail? Are we going to be going back to the people every time we're doing each and every small thing? I think that needs serious clarification and thoughts.
Honorable Speaker, if you allow me to in on this.
Same issue?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Participation. Nominee, thank you that you're you're a lawyer of good standing. Probably you can help this country. Public participation. I read the judgment on the finance bill. They said we introduced new clauses on the floor of the House, which is actually the reason why third reading happens, you know, and no, the committee of the whole House, where we debate and, you know, say, no, let's change this, let's change this. But a court says we should not do that, you know. Every time I have an opportunity to introduce or to change a clause on the floor of the House, I have to take it to public participation. Then now come back again.
I take judicial notice that that matter is now pending before the Supreme Court, and therefore is sub judice.
Yes. But I also want to...
But you can talk about public participation in general terms, because the process consumes public resources and public time.
Yes.
When is public participation adequate for purposes of legislation?
Yes, on the same. Also, and we have a situation where every judge now has his own set of what public participation should be, and therefore they bring out judgments on this is not public participation, and yet another court somewhere ruled on what public participation should be and should not. You are a good lawyer of good standing. I want to give that to you. How do you help this country?
Nominated from Honorable Posing. You know, that is a very emotive area now because it is causing a lot of rampers all over. Posing?
I agree with you, our senior, our speaker, that it is a very juicy area, particularly this of public participation. Because, and it's good that the nominee here is likely to become the next Attorney General should she find favor of Parliament.
Don't prejudge.
If approved by Parliament.
If found fair, okay, yeah.
Yeah, she might be, Speaker, you don't know. I don't know also. But what I'm saying, Speaker, this might be an opportunity for her to listen to us, as the people of Kenya, that public participation thing needs to be thought about very clearly so that it doesn't curtail the role of parliamentarian. Because then, if you say everything is public participation, including amendments at the Committee of the whole House, which is provided for in Article 95. So what is going on? So I think, Honorable Speaker, this is a very juicy matter that the nominee, should she get a favor of Parliament, should dive into, as I call it, a low-hanging fruit. Otherwise, we will be confusing a country in terms of legislation.
Nominee,
thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, sir, and members of this committee. Adequate or meaningful or impactful public participation will be public participation that corresponds with the requirements of the Constitution. Constitutionalism requires that if there are provisions in the Constitution and we need to practice them and to promote them, there has to be guidance in form of regulations, legislation, and policy. And that is the reason why it was my view that there is need for a policy, because from the seat of the executive, or if I'm confirmed as the Attorney General, it would be my duty to propose a policy to Cabinet and to instigate a process of policy making with a view to legislation. Then the legislation will come before this August House. So there is a need for regulation through policy and legislation.
If you find favor and become our Attorney General, that is one of the milestones we would look to you to assist Parliament. Within what period do you think you can be able to give the country a Public Participation Act, regulations, and rules?
If approved by this House,
yes,
and if appointed and sworn in to serve in the capacity of the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, 100 days.
We will hold you to that if you get there.
Yes. May I answer something about the Advocates Complaints Commission?
Yes.
The Advocates Complaints Commission is also under the Office of the Attorney General, but the Disciplinary Tribunal is not under the Attorney General. There is a need for the Office of the Attorney General to review the capacity, the structure of the Advocates Complaints Commission, because they only have one panel that is sitting now. If approved for this post, I would also think that there is a need for us to sieve the cases that go through the Complaints Commission so that the very trivial ones do not clog the system. We only deal with the more complex ones. But otherwise, there's a need to take an audit and come up with good resolutions on how we can structure the department. Thank you.
All the questions answered? Okay, so we can now move your question. Which one?
Questions.
By Honorable Mokami, I think it was about the mothers and vulnerable people who are in prison. Is it?
And the fight against corruption. Yeah, in the economic crime.
Do you remember it, Nominee, or do you want her to repeat?
Yes, I do remember.
Okay.
Yes. About the mothers, the young people, and the children who are in custody, they are clients of the Director of Public Prosecutions, but the Director of the Public Prosecutions is using the tools that are available to him. So issues of expediting hearing of cases, issues of making pretrial detention shorter, legal representation, are not within the purview of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And that is the reason why, as the Attorney General, this is an area that I'm passionate about. I am going to do all it takes to come back to this Parliament to persuade you that we need to relook at our criminal justice laws. I do not think, from the heart that I wear, that we are achieving the purposes of punishment, being retribution, rehabilitation, and restoration. Is the prosecution the weakest link in the fight against corruption? I was asked. The criminal justice system acts as a chain, and each one of us has a role to play. I know that the sector has been suffering from capacity, budget reallocation, sometimes inadequate, insufficient investigations. If approved as the Attorney General, I will bring in other tools to help in the fight against corruption. One, we would strengthen the operationalization of Chapter 6 of the Constitution by clarifying what government agencies can do. We will use the forums that we have, like the NCAJ, where the Attorney General sits, to review the process of hearing of corruption cases. It has to be shortened, and I'm happy to report that as a prosecutor, I know the President has recommended shortening of the time that corruption cases should be heard. There is also a need for us to use a tool called asset forfeiture and confiscation so that we take out the profits from the accused persons. If that tool was used, we'll make crime to be less attractive to the accused persons. We will also try to share resources and enhance the capacity of the officers. So each of the criminal justice sector agencies is suffering from something, but if we work together collaboratively, supported by this House, we'll be able to put in mechanisms to deal with corruption. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Mishi, Honorable Raso, and Honorable Mule in that order.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chairman. Honorable Chairman, before my question, I also want to add what our nominee has just said, that it is one of the areas where if approved, she's going to put some reforms on the issue of presidential pardon. Because what we have been seeing, it is done politically. Those who have demonstrated that they have reformed and they need to have that presidential pardon, they don't access that. So while you say you have a passion on that area, on the prisoners, please also include the issue of presidential pardon. And Honorable Chairman, my question will also be on corruption, but in a different angle. And I just want to say that despite that we have so many laws regarding corruption, what are you going to ensure that there is consistently enforced? Because the problem here is enforcement, or rather implementation of the laws which have already legislated. And on the same perspective, how are you going to protect whistleblowers and witnesses who come forward with information about corrupt cases? On the same breath, one of the areas which we have found there is a lot of corruption and wastages, it is on public procurement. So how are you going to ensure that you protect public funds, you also ensure there is transparency, there is accountability, so that at least the issue of austerity measure can be achieved? I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Russell. Honorable Russell.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam Senior Counsel, you rightly said